I'm super happy to be here. I'm very grateful to the team at Learners and to Colette for inviting me to do this. When her and I were first talking about doing this event and this talk, she was enticing me with all of the fantastic speakers who are going to be here. She's like, you know, we have Christina Janzer from Slack and Kristen Torrey from Figma. And I was like, I'm not sure if you're trying to convince me to speak or not to speak, because Christina was the last person I reported to, and then Kristen was the first person that hired me. So in some ways I thought I was here for like a 2020 performance review. She convinced me that's not the case. But hopefully then, like now, I will more than meet expectations. Can I have someone drop the speaker notes sizing real quick? Cool. Thank you, Alec. Give me like 2 or 3 clicks. Yeah, perfect. So I wanted to share that personal story, A, because I thought it was going to get a laugh, but also because the talk that I'm giving today is very personal, or at least it's personal to me. So we're here to talk about good research, which I think is a very important topic. And as people who practice research, I think it's very important that we have a perspective on what good research looks like. In fact, that's basically the punchline of the talk today. So I think that no matter where you are in your career, if you don't already have one, you should definitely come up with your own definition of what good research is. You should regularly reflect on that definition, update it when you need to, and let that definition guide you in your practice. I say that with 100% survivorship bias because that's the thing that's worked for me, and as far as I can understand, a lot of the people that I respect. So with my time today, I want to tell you a little bit about me and my definition of good research, how it came about, not because I think that mine is perfect or I want you to agree with me, but I think that the twists and turns of my career that has shaped my definition will be helpful and instructive. And I'm hoping that I can kind of spark your creativity and broaden your horizons. And towards the end, I want to leave you with a couple of questions as you start to negotiate and navigate what it means to define good research for yourselves. So, let's begin. First off, I'm Behzod. I'm a white passing male of Iranian and European descent. I did undergraduate work in rhetoric and then had the chance to do a master's in human-centered design at the beautifully interdisciplinary program at the University of Washington. I spent the better part of the last decade at 2 now large and reasonably well-funded research organizations, Facebook and Slack, where I was for about 4 years each. 2 years ago, I went solo, and work went from being sort of one thing or at one place to being a portfolio of things, some of which I want to share because I think they're helpful for the talk. So 2 years ago, I started yet another studio because I deeply believe that research is valuable to companies far earlier than we currently hire researchers. And I wanted to prove that and then start to build models for what that looks like. Through the studio, I've been able to work with a lot of really wonderful small organizations and help people build good research practices, whether they're a 5-person company or a fantastic organization like Figma. I'm also an executive in residence at Reforge, where I built and lead the User Insights for Product Decisions program, and I've had the pleasure of teaching over 500 people in the last 1.5 years about what good research looks like, at least in my definition, and helping them put it into practice in their organizations. And I also have the privilege of being an advisor to fantastic companies like Maze. And with them, I'm not just helping them develop good research practices as an organization, but also embedding those practices into their products and to their content. And finally, I'm a pretty active angel investor and a venture partner at LCAP. So I get to talk to dozens of organizations each year. And I share this to help you understand that my perspective is not informed just by large corporate research, but by the genuine curiosity of lots and lots of different teams. So let's talk about good research. When I, and I imagine many of you, and a lot of the wonderful folks who've spoken this week think about good research, one of the things that keeps coming up is that good research is learning. And I think that's true, but I think it's a necessary yet insufficient definition for good research. For me, good research is learning in service of making decisions. We are learning so that we can do something, so that we can take action in some way. And this is something that I believe strongly, and Alec has had to listen to me talk about back since 2019 when I spoke at UXR Conf in Toronto. Looking back, it's really easy to see that this was one of the first places that I started to articulate this perspective about what good research is. And as I mentioned earlier, it is the core idea that underlines the program that I built at Reforge, where we talk about how starting with your decision has to shape the work that you are doing. But as I've been doing this work and spending time with more teams, I've started to notice something. Somehow, it seems that over the last decade plus, a lot of us in the community have deluded ourselves into believing that the only people that we were supposed to be making decisions for, or helping make decisions, are people who are in product and design, and maybe marketing. And I want to lean on Paul Adams a little bit here. He's the Chief Product Officer at Intercom, and he gave a fantastic talk at UX London in 2018 called The End of Navel Gazing. Adams talked about how our location shapes our perspective. So I'm up here, and this room looks very different to me than those of you who are sitting in the seats or those of you who are joining us online. And Adams mentions that 500 years ago, we thought that the Earth was the center of the universe. And then we learned that it's on the edge of something, that's on the edge of something, that's on the edge of something. And that shift in perspective changed everything. Adams goes on to mention that this is similar to his experience in UX, saying that he mistakenly thought for a long time that UX was the center of the organization, that we were the intersection of business and marketing and technology and other things, and that if UX was about the customer experience and the customer was the center of the business, then UX should be the center of the organization. He realized that this was a mistake, and that product and design and research were parts of the organization, but our success also required things like sales and HR and marketing and customer success and all of these other teams to work together to achieve our goals. And similarly, I get pretty disappointed and disheartened when I think about how much people in our discipline are fighting to be valued by product and design teams when there are so many opportunities to do good research outside of those parts of the organization. And it feels like this trap that we've fallen into is very similar to this diagram that people throw around when you talk about an MVP, where we made a skateboard to prove that we could use wheels together. And then we had people around us like these skateboards so much, we just kept making different skateboards. And now as a research community, we're fighting about the right way to build skateboards, forgetting that the whole goal was to not move people blocks by themselves, but to move people miles together. And so we've lost the plot and we decided, well, we don't need to build engines or cars or any of those things, let's just keep making other kinds of skateboards. And somehow we forget that our superpowers are critical thinking and rigorous curiosity, and that there are massive opportunities for us to use these skills in other parts of the organization. Yes, product and design will benefit, but they should be a part of our practice, not all of it. Now, I'm definitely not the first person to draw attention to this, but when I hear a lot of other people talk about it, I hear them falling into the same trap that Adams did, saying, well, research can be important to the whole organization, so that we should be the center of it. And now, for those of you who know me, centering our role in the organization is probably not something I believe super strongly, because I'm the person who wrote an essay called Democratization is Our Job. I actually think it's decentering our activities and asking how can we use our special skills to help our colleagues achieve their goals that are going to drive the most impact. What decisions can we help other people make more confidently? Where can we reduce risk in the organization? The place that I think we need to be playing is with others, because we're not going to help win over the rest of the organization just because we help make the best products. We're going to be the most impactful as a research community because we help people make the best decisions and help people understand how to de-risk the things that they are doing. Now, I didn't always define good research this way. First, to acknowledge that. When I first started in industry, I thought that good research was largely based on the academic definition. You know, follow the rules, acknowledge and account for bias, and because you did research correctly, it will have an impact. It will be good research. You don't have to be a researcher in industry long to realize that that's not necessarily the case. That, fortunately, hopefully for many of you in a healthy organization, your partners trust you to be an expert. They see you as an expert in your role and they lean on you for those research methods and approaches. So that method slide that you put before the key findings to argue for the validity of your work, you probably don't need that there. In fact, when I was at Facebook, I used to give a presentation to researchers about presenting research. And I had a slide in there titled, "A Quick Word About Methods." The word was appendix. Early in my career, I too had lost the forest for the trees. I was so focused on doing research correctly that I stopped to think about, why was I doing this research at all? It wasn't until a number of my studies landed poorly that I realized that good research hygiene was the minimum criteria to fill, not the maximum. I realized that my own definition of good research lacked a why, and that much of my work was in service of selfish objectives. I wanted to seem competent to my peers. I wanted a promotion. yeah, I wanted to help our customers and our teams, but I thought those were the outcomes of doing good research, not things that were necessary to shape the work itself. And it was actually a participant who helped me realize that I was sort of struggling in this, because we went through, I had them at Facebook, and he's going through a flow for an app, and he was doing everything just fine. But I had expected that people were struggling, and I did this work the right way, and it was not at all impactful. This study helped me realize that in a lot of cases I was doing exactly what I was asked. But the thing that I was being asked to do by a product manager was often their best guess at how I could help. They were choosing methods or approaches out of awareness or convenience, not conviction. And I realized that I needed to be much more proactive in understanding what decision they were trying to make so that I could play a more active role in identifying what evidence we needed to gather to make those decisions. And I realized that they were, I thought that they were very smart people. They'd worked with researchers before and I could trust them. But I realized that I was putting an unnecessary burden on them to define what good research looked like. And I needed to be more proactive in owning that for myself. And as I started to think about the opportunity to help people make decisions, not just do methods correctly, it started opening up the different ways that I could play with others. And one of the incredible opportunities that it offered me was working with the facilities team at Slack to think about what should our offices look like. One approach to this would be go to the leaders of all the different departments and ask them what they need. And that would probably be totally fine and get you an office that was reasonably good. But we realized that the evidence we needed to make these decisions about what our office looked like was very different. It was, what does desk and conference room utilization look like? Who's in these spaces, when and for how long, and what are they doing? What do people want out of the office? What kinds of work do they like to do? Do they want to be in social spaces like our cafe? Do they want to be in conference rooms working together? Do they want to be at their desks? And so as we started to think through these things, it helped us make better decisions about ratios for each department. We learned that the sales team largely used 1- and 2-person rooms for individual calls, and the 10-plus person meeting rooms because they used to have these quarterly business reviews or they'd invite clients on site. Product and engineering thrived in the 4- to 6-person rooms where they'd bring teams together to make these decisions. The 10-person rooms were not super utilized, and the 1- to 2-person rooms were also rarely used. And so this allowed us to think about who can fit on what floors together, either because they had conflicting or collaborative needs. And I probably wouldn't have thought about this if I was so focused on just helping product and design teams. But as I started to ask who else in the organization can we use our wonderful research skills to help make better decisions, it opened up this other world. Another really meaningful shift in my understanding of good research came from here in New York. I used to come and spend time with advertisers when I worked on the ads team at Facebook, and I would go and spend hours in their offices watching them how they use products. When possible, I had other people join me in the field, and it was really helpful to have a second person, not just to counteract my own bias, but I couldn't really record things that were going on, so having another set of eyes and ears and notes was really helpful. And while it was great to bring folks like product managers or product marketing managers in, the real unlock for me was bringing in an engineer who had built the thing that we were talking about, or someone in customer support who'd spent hundreds of hours answering this question. I realized that they had a much more nuanced understanding of what was going on than I did. They had much more experience in the product, and they had a much better framework. And so they were actually not only able to help me gather evidence to help my teams make decisions, they were able to gather evidence to make decisions I wasn't even aware of. And this helped me realize that good research isn't just multiplayer in terms of like it's a team sport moving in the same direction. It's multiplayer because all of us have things that we need to learn so that we can make our own decisions. And it opened me up to thinking about where else can I help other people make their decisions more effectively? How can I get out of the way and enable them to do the work that they want to do? And so a really good example of this came from my time at Slack, where I had the opportunity alongside my colleague Nicole Zhang to partner with our teams in customer success. So customer success at Slack was sort of like the account managers. They worked to support our Slack clients in terms of helping them onboard to Slack, channel design, et cetera. And for their work, independent of us, they needed to send lots of surveys. They wanted to send surveys before Slack went out to understand team structure. They wanted to understand where we could help them learn how to use Slack better. But of course, as indicated in this picture, some of those questions were worded a little bit different. Some of the number of answer options were a little bit different. In fact, some of the surveys were sent on totally different platforms. And this wasn't because they were malicious or they were trying to practice poorly, they just didn't know any better. And so what we ended up doing was, instead of leaving them on our own and just saying, oh, you're not doing good research, we decided to partner with them. We leaned in and we said, okay, this is a critical part of the work that you're trying to do. And not only do we not want to own it, we don't want to be responsible for sending every survey that you're going to send out to your customers. Like, we literally can't. Our team is not big enough. And so we have to find a way to help them help themselves. And so we spent time auditing these surveys that they were doing, interviewing a lot of the folks on the CSM teams to understand what their goals were and what the decisions were that were being made. And then we built out a range of templates for them that they could use and leverage that were following best survey practices that our survey scientists had worked on, that we'd standardized language against. And actually, we also moved them over to Qualtrics so that we had comparable data with our tracking surveys. So helping them help themselves also helped us. And again, prior to this, I wasn't really thinking about how to work with customer success in this way, and I'm not sure that many of you were either. So the last and probably most recent shift in my perspective of what good research is has to do with time and scope. Not scale in terms of millions of users when we think about growth, but what good research looks like across a company. As I, at least for now, have kind of solidified my definition of good research, it's become a lens by which I start to look for other opportunities. Where are research activities happening, especially for folks who don't have researcher in their title? And how can I educate, enable, and empower them to do good work on their own without having to be consistently there supervising or touching the work? And when I realized, at least from this work, and especially over the last couple of years, I think there are so many opportunities for us to be valuable to teams outside of the ones that we report to. And there are lots of good reasons in your organization why, there are probably incentives for you not to do that. But when I think about the research teams and practices that have been really successful that people are proud of, this kind of company and organizational level impact is because we are starting to work outside of our reporting lines. And something that I've started to develop a lot of conviction about is that the velocity in which an organization learns is one of the key leading indicators of success. People regularly talk about the importance of failing fast, but what they're really highlighting is the need to more intentionally learn and adapt. The longer your feedback loops are, the more conviction you need for every decision, and a lot of organizations just can't afford that. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations seem to care about having a culture of knowing, of being right, rather than a culture of learning. And it's something that we're conditioned to, at least in the West, in a lot of schools at a very early age, and it's hard to break away from. But when you look at the challenges that your organizations face, or organizations that have stood for the test of time, it's not that their success comes from being an organization that knows. It's not that they continue to regurgitate answers about the past. It's that they become an organization that learns. And I think about organizations like IBM. Started 110 years old, functionally making punch card computers. And now they have a financial services business and a consulting arm. Or I think about Microsoft, who started by building operating systems and now has multiple billions of dollars in revenue per quarter for consumer hardware. This didn't come from just doing the same thing that they thought they knew. This came from questioning the world as it changed and adapting. So this last shift in how I think about good research is what good research looks like not at the 3-foot level for a lot of us in the day-to-day, but what it looks like at a 35,000-foot level. I get the pleasure of working with a range of organizations, so I'm always thinking about what good research looks like in terms of process and infrastructure and systems. And while it's a bit more raw than some of the stuff I shared, I love to talk through what I think are some of the key ingredients for an organization that learns, or what good research looks like at an organizational level. I believe, and feel free to disagree with me, that an organization that learns has at least 3 things. It has intentional, responsible, and sustainable practices of learning. It requires that you build an operating model that enables everyone in your organization to participate meaningfully, should they choose, and that learning is made visible to the organization. And this is something that I think a lot of us have struggled with in our companies in various ways. So just like there are many ways of knowing, there are many ways of learning. And you want to make sure that at each part in your organization, throughout the different parts of product development, at each customer touch point, you have people in your organization with the right mechanisms to learn in the ways that are appropriate. This means that you're gathering the right data in the right way at the right time with the right breadth and depth to help people make decisions with confidence. And it means that you're focused on the right problems and aligning solutions to those problems. Learning for the sake of learning is great, but it's also not free. And so when I talk about being responsible, I think about the burden that we have as researchers to make sure that we have subject matter experts in the right places in the organization to help scaffold that learning. One of the things I like to ask folks that I've worked with about research is like how they'd feel to be on the receiving end of something. I have folks who I've worked with in marketing that want to send out a 100-question survey. And for some reason, they don't see anything wrong with it. And I'm like, great, let's just imagine that landed in your inbox. How would you feel? And they're like, I'm obviously not taking it. Bingo. So being responsible plays out in a few different ways. Another thing I think about is the difference between helping people get answers versus helping people get insights. And when I say that, getting an answer is sort of like a temperature check of right now. how far have we come, right? Discrete answer that helps me understand what's going on. Getting an insight helps me make subsequent decisions. What does the path look like ahead? How do I need to prepare my pacing and my work and make subsequent decisions about when to fuel up or drink water or whatever? And then when I talk about research being sustainable, one of the most important things is to recognize that all research has a cost. Not just to you to plan and execute, but to your participants to leave whatever they're doing and show up and participate in the research. It has a cost to your team to help plan, engage with, synthesize, etc. And I think that not enough people think about, is this work ROI positive for everyone involved? Not just, does this benefit me as an organization? I also think that it's very important that you protect your customers both in all of the necessary, legal, and responsible ways. Treat the people that you're working with in research like people, and you'd be surprised how many organizations struggle to grasp that concept. The second thing I think about is building an operating model that allows for everyone to participate meaningfully in learning. And so as researchers, one of the ways you can do this is make sure that you can have explicit boundaries about what everyone is able to do and not do, and what are some of the rules of engagement and expectations, right? A lot of our partners don't have a strong understanding of why we have PII or what it looks like to follow GDPR. That's okay, we can help them. And there are a bunch of different ways you can think about these models, and this says high risk over here and low risk over there in very, very light gray font. But for the sake of argument, I think about this on a spectrum of risk. We have some high risk activities for whatever reason, medium risk, low risk activities. And when I say risk, I think about the risk of something going wrong. You know, a damage to a participant, a threat to the business, et cetera. In general, these correlate highly to the kinds of work that tend to be about getting answers versus getting insights. And for me, I think about different ways that researchers play across the spectrum. There's some things that we are uniquely qualified to do and we should own, the things that we should drive. There are also things that we can help other people do. Maybe things where we trust them as drivers, but we're gonna sit in the front seat and help them navigate. We're gonna let them know when to speed up or slow down, when a turn is coming, and prepare them. And then there's other places where we've gone through the journey so many times that we've made it safe for other people to drive themselves. And it's important to think about how you have a mix of these things in your organization. I think for me earlier in my career, and for a lot of us, comfort state looks something like this. There is just a radical amount of things that we should own, and unfortunately a lot of our organizations look like this, where there's just a lot of important stuff that's not supported by anyone. And so you have to think about how can we actually close that gap and get to some sort of more balanced state, where we're not taking on the burden of doing all the things that maybe we don't need to be doing, and we've made it safe for other people to engage in these practices. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what are the boundaries and how do I figure these things out? And I think this responsibility primarily falls on us and research teams. And to do this, I encourage people I work with to ask some of the most common questions. Who, what, when, where, how, and why. I think about what it is that you can do as a practice. Like, what kinds of research are you able to support? Who can you help? How much can you do these things? Where and when can you do this work? And why is that work worth doing? And then flipping that. And thinking about this from an organization perspective. What's the data or insight that your organization needs? Who needs that? How much do they need to make the decisions? When is the cadence of decision making? When can you engage with your customers and where? And why is this both important for the organization? And again, why is this worth the cost for all parties who are involved? And so as you start to balance these things, it helps you understand what you as a research practice have on the left and what you need to build towards for your organization on the right. And this starts to build your operating model. And so the last point I want to make is about how it's important to make learning visible to your organization. And when I say this, a lot of people, the first thing that comes to mind is, wait, but we have a research repository. We're doing this. And I really hate to break it to you, but for many of your partners around the organization, your incredibly well-curated, tagged research repository looks a lot like this. And you really don't want to make your product partners going spelunking for what it is that you're trying to help them with. We've unfairly put the burden on them to know that a study took place at a certain time with a specific title. You know, earlier in this week, Justin mentioned that relationships are the wire that insights travel on. And I think that that's very critical here and for our practice, because too much of us are putting the burden on other people to take action based on our work or even find our learnings. I think about this a lot more like being a hydro engineer. If you think about all the insights and learning you have, like water, they're coming in from these different places. And it's important for us to make sure that all the people who need water get water, and that we're not also flooding people. We've worked with lots of teams that are just gonna have a launch, and then we're like, great, let's start getting them a lot of feedback. They probably have a month of work that they wanna do, and so the really interesting strategic things that you wanna help them with, they're just not ready for. Sending the water to them is just gonna flood everything out, and it makes all of their work harder. So think about it from their perspective. How do we start to make this information visible to them so that they can take action on it when they're ready to take action? Okay, we're in the home stretch, and I'm towards the end of my time. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to close with a couple questions for you as you start to think about what good research means and as you make sense of this wonderful week that we've had. So the first one is going to be painfully obvious. What do you think good research is today? And I'd encourage you to think about, where did those beliefs come from? When you've inherited those beliefs from others, were those good things, bad things? Which of those do you need to unlearn? And I know that in my journey, I've had a lot of things I had to unlearn. The second one is, what does it look like for you to practice research in a way that not just expands the surface area that you get to play in, but expands other people's understanding of what our discipline offers? How can you change people's perspectives about us from being a group of people that talk to customers or test prototypes to a group of people that can facilitate learning or improve the quality of decisions that are being made to actually change the trajectory of outcomes for an organization? And the third one, and this is probably the most uncomfortable for many of us, what does it look like to start to open up our practice in a meaningful way so that others are able to not just observe, but contribute to the learning process? Where do we need to put aside our egos and give away our Legos? Where do we start to safely and responsibly let other people drive? And what will it take for you to do that, assuming that the appetite is there? As the world continues to change, so should our practice. And before I wrap up, I do want to give a very big thank you to a lot of people who have shaped my own definition of what good research looks like. I'm very excited for all of you being here and investing in this and the journeys that you are on, and how you're not just going to shape what good research looks like for you, but hopefully what good research looks like for all of us. Because I really do think that research is an infinite game. There's really no winning. The reward for the work is often more work. And so the thing for us to think about is, how do we get more people excited to play so that all of us can continue to benefit? Thank you.